Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video, well, it's going to be a combination of things. First off, my wife and I are loading up the RV, putting my little Honda on the tow dolly, and we're headed to Florida. There is another YouTuber who is building a 69 fastback Mach 1, and he asked me to come down and help him do some sheet metal fitment. Now, I have not seen a car in person. I have seen pictures, and I'm going to try to help him get stuff aligned and hopefully have success. So we're going to pack all this stuff up, and we're headed to Florida, and maybe we'll do some highlights along the way. I don't know yet, but stay tuned. All right, we made it to Florida. No problems, everything went smooth, and we arrived last night and set up the RV and unloaded and all that sort of thing. And this morning I am on my way to Peter's house. His name is Peter Sessler. He has his own YouTube channel, and he is building a 429 tribute car. So he's using all NPD parts for the most part. I know there's some dynacorn mixed in, but mainly the body is NPD. And so he's asking for some help trying to get some fitment taken care of, and I'm going to see what I can do to help him. So we'll get over to his place and take a look at his project. So here's what we'll be working with today. Hopefully we can make it look like, oh wait a minute, no, that's not the car. That's what he started with. He had bought a decent looking 69 fastback, and of course somebody had hidden all the problems with body filler and patches, and he said it was just terrible. It was just really bad once he got it blasted. So he went from that to this. Now this car is all new sheet metal, and I mean all new sheet metal. The floor pan is dynacorn. The mini tubs are Mustang Sheet, and the side pieces are dynacorn. You can see the silver paint there. So the A pillar, B pillar, all that stuff, and everything else is NPD. Now he lives in Florida, so NPD is literally right down the road. And the idea was to build the body, the exterior especially, out of NPD parts. I don't know if NPD offers the inner structure like dynacorn does. I have no idea. So everything here that you see is NPD. Now the problem is some of this stuff doesn't work well together. So, you know, the dynacorn stuff may be built to a different spec, and NPD may be a slightly different spec. Now when you do all that, or put those pieces together, maybe they interact well, maybe they don't. But what he has problems with is some of these gaps and overlaps of fenders and doors, and he's asked me to come and help him try to solve some of these problems. So he's done a decent job getting all this together. He's put in filler strips up here in that channel like I demonstrated before. And apparently, I guess Mustang Sheet makes those pieces. I don't know. I mean, I didn't know they did that. I probably would have made my own anyway, which I did. But they sell those. He has the original cowl panel, which I've already talked to him about. We're going to use that one instead of this one, just because it's a better stamping. It's more crisp. And we'll have to address some other things as we move along. The hood itself, brand new fiberglass hood. He had that custom made. I think it weighs 23 pounds. And the idea is this will have a 429 in it, and it'll have velocity stacks sticking up through the hood. He also has custom hood hinges on this. And you can see it's got the Mustang 2 style suspension under it. And we'll go over more of that later on with him. Let him talk about what's in it. I don't know the specifics at this point, but the original parts on this car are the quarter extensions. I think that's the only thing, and the bumper, or at least that bumper was on the other body that you saw outside. So here you can see the frame rail down here. It's been reinforced, and he's done all this work himself in his home shop here. So you can see really decent home shop. And we're gonna try to use some of the stuff in here to maybe solve some of these problems. All right, so back here we've done some fitment work. We talked about the idea of leaving this as a gap and doing seam sealer or welding this shut, and because basically he's building a custom car, he wants to smooth that out, and I get it. All this is custom, and that'll be a nice transition once this is ground down. Maybe a little more welding to blend that out. So we did that on both sides. Welded, good and solid. Now, yeah, we also, and this was, he didn't have the experience. I understand that. So when you're putting these things together, sometimes you don't realize how things interact. So this bracket or brace, by default, he had put it up front on this filler panel, and it's actually supposed to go between the rear panel, tail panel, and that filler. I've done a video on this, but there's a gap right there where that slides in, and then it comes up underneath and gets welded into place. So this was out of place slightly, and it was affecting how the trunk would close. And I cut those loose, and we just pushed them back for the moment. Those will get welded later. Now the trunk will shut nice, but we still need to do some adjusting because the holes in the deck lid are not long enough, meaning this can't come forward any further. So we've got a little bit of a gap on this side and a bigger gap on this side, and that hopefully will all be addressed when the holes are enlarged. You can see there's space here, and all this is aftermarket, so you have to kind of deal with what you're given with these parts. So he's going to open up the holes in the deck lid, and this will slide forward slightly and help with this extension here. So we'll see how it goes. We're going to try to work on this quarter panel, and the problem is the door sticks out from the quarter. So my fix is going to be cutting a slice, as I've done many times on other cars, opening up the mating flange basically and bringing the quarter out slightly to try to mimic the shape of this door as close as we can. That's going to be the next thing in the sequence.
So, do you also want to mention the relationship here, which I didn't know was a thing?
Yeah.
It's definitely a thing.
Yes, yeah. Oh, but this is Peter, by the way.
Hi, guys.
So,
hi, gang.
Yeah, hey, gang. So we were talking about this earlier. These are the original extensions on this car. And one thing that I get concerned with is how stuff like this interacts. So you can see right now, you couldn't get a piece of paper inside of that gap because there is no gap. My thoughts and concerns are, when you get to the point of putting on primer and paint and clear coat, you're going to add so many mils of thickness to both of those pieces basically. And so stuff like that you have to address way early in the process, because if you have all that buildup of paint and clear coat and primer and everything else, and you bolt that on, something has to give. You're going to be pushing something one way or the other, or pushing paint off. So he wants to keep these original extensions, and that's just one thing I was pointing out to him. This side is a little bit better, still kind of close, but you don't want to have direct contact with any painted surfaces because it'll come back and haunt you later. Mm-hmm. So we'll get started on that and see what we can get done. All right, I'm sure many of you have seen me do this before. I did this sort of thing on the 68 Mustang known as Jade. I have done this on the 65 Mustang that I did years ago. This just is a common kind of adjustment that I feel like has to be made. Now, these panels, they do have space. Like, you can push the panel in and out when you mock everything up. So I always recommend test fit, meaning put the door on, get it to line up with the rocker panel, get the quarter panel to line up with the door, and then do your welding. Now, I know that he was probably under the assumption that, hey, this panel's built correctly and it's just going to slide right up there and you push it in and weld it. And what I'm doing here is cutting right along the edge of the flange and opening up this panel so that I can take these screwdrivers and work the edge of the panel back. Now, I'm not in a hurry. I'm not trying to force anything out of position. I'm gently massaging this as I go. I'm using screwdrivers on the outside of the flange, and I'm also placing screwdrivers from the backside. That's why you see me reaching my arm around. I'm trying to make the panel stay in basically the position that I want it. So a little tweaking here and there. I even use the hammer some to address the flange coming out, and part of it needs to come out and some of it needs to go back in. You can also see on the panel where I've drawn lines basically with my finger. You can see a shadow, and what I'm doing by that is indicating where it may be high or low. And in this point, I'm using the hammer to knock this in just a little, and it just takes time. You know, these things, they don't happen instantly. So I took the hammer there and I was hammering down on the face of the flange in order to compress it slightly and actually help maintain some of that shape. So more adjusting, more adjusting, more adjusting. And I run my fingers, even though I have a glove on, I can feel it. I run my finger over the gap, and I try to make sure that I can't feel a drop in the transition. So I know it's tedious and it takes time, but these are the kind of things you have to do to eliminate some of these problems. Because once you're done with all of this sort of thing, then body filler will come and take care of the true gap, let's say the true seam. But eliminating a lot of that excess material makes a big difference. Now at this point I have everything where I like it, but I'm going to start tack welding it in. And you can see he's in the background grinding off the welds from the bracket that holds the deck lid latch. So we talked about that, and so he's cleaning that up so that it can be look like it's supposed to. Now as I'm doing this, I'm still adjusting. I'm looking at the movement of the panel, and what I'll do is I'll weld a few little spots, get the feel for it, make sure that it feels correct, and then come back in, make some minor adjustments. So I guess I'm used to the feel of the metal so that I can tell basically just how much I need to push it out, and that's what I'm doing with the screwdriver. I'm getting it out just a little bit and then adding some tacks to that to hold it in place. And I continue to do this slowly and meticulously to try to make it as close as possible. I also use different screwdrivers. So this is a wider, thicker screwdriver, and that just gives you a little more surface to move things. And I go back and forth with several of these. I end up with the small one and the large one, and I'm just trying to make sure I get the panel to move or I want it to. Now after all this is done and I'm doing this adjustment over and over and over, of course I'll come back later on and basically fully weld that whole seam now that I created. So I'm glad he had the door latches on. I'm glad he had the strikers in the right spot, and he even had the bumpers on the door at the top and the bottom so that the door stayed basically where it would be normally. So like if you had the gasket on, it pushes out just a little. Now I'm just going to keep on doing this until I'm satisfied with the shape, and still tweaking with the screwdrivers, using the mallet or the hammer here just to work on that edge just a little more, and it just repeat the same process over and over. And I know it's tedious, but the end result is you have a nice consistent shape between the door and the quarter panel, and you'll be much happier with it once you get it smoothed out and to that point. Now I do the same thing on the other side, and I'll probably show a little bit of that later on in the video, but here I am just kind of adding more tacks to hold it in place. The other side needed a lot more work to get it straightened out, and I'll talk about that later. So while I've been working on the door, he's been grinding down the welds up here, getting this smoothed up the way he wants. Looking pretty good. Of course, filler, again, will address how that ends up looking overall. And the door, I'm pretty close. Now, of course, the quarter panel has a little bit of a sheen to it, and it will take filler. We know that this isn't going to be dead on exact, but I've eliminated a lot of the problem. So what I want to do now is finish welding in that gap and then move on, probably do the same thing on the passenger side, because it has a similar situation. So you can see here, the gap, finger hits that edge. So this needs to come out a little, and maybe some right down here. So I'll do the same thing on this side, try to clean that up. And then we're going to work on the fronts, or both front sections as well. So we're going to see if we can manipulate the fender to get closer to eliminating this door overlap. And it's always a challenge because you can maneuver a fender in a lot of different ways. This side has a bigger transition there, so we'll see what we can do with that. But I'm going to finish up that door weld, or the quarter weld on this side, and then move to the passenger side. So on this section of the quarter panel, we had cut a line basically to allow the panel to lower, like it was too high where the deck lid met the panel. And I couldn't think of any other way to do this besides trying to reshape the deck lid, which was not an option. And so we elected to make some cuts, and we were able to push it down and get it to fit much closer to the shape of the deck lid. Now I will point out, he had put Dynamat all through this car, which is great for sound deadening, of course, but having to come back and redo some of this work, the Dynamat was a bit of a problem because there was a lot of fumes. What you don't see is we have a big fan blowing while I'm doing all this stuff from the front to the back of the shop. And even when I was doing some welding, we tried to keep some air movement because the Dynamat material would melt basically. So it took some time. I was blowing off the welds to try to eliminate any warping, and he liked to do that, so I was following his lead on that process, and just welding these pieces back together and trying to make sure that everything, all the little divots or low spots are filled in, and of course it'll get blended down and smoothed over with body filler later. Well, we've made some progress. I've been working on this driver's side door to quarter transition, and as I mentioned before, I've cut this, you see in the time lapse, worked the flange out, and now it's very, very close to where it should be. Skim coated filler, of course, will be coming later on. There's no way around that. But this fits a whole lot better than it did. Back here, same thing. We had the transition problem with the quarter panel to the deck lid. And to fix that, we did a relief cut here and pressed this down and welded it, because you can only move so much. Like the deck lid, if it lines up good here at the top and at this front corner and fit the extension well, then the issue had to be somewhere else. So right now, that's what we've done to alleviate that, is get this down and correct that. Now, one of the other problems we have, there's a problem in the front and there's a problem back here on the roof, and we're going to show you those. This side looks really good. This transition, these lines, the body lines look really nice. We put the chrome in there, and it fits like it should. On this side, for whatever reason, we don't know for sure, the lines don't line up. So the problem is this body line and this body line do not line up with each other, meaning this one is inboard, and so when you put the trim up there, you can fit nicely on this flange, but you end up with a huge gap in here. Now, you could, I'm not recommending this at all, somebody might just pile body filler in there and try to make it work. Not a good idea. The idea right now for us is to make a cut somewhere out here, a relief cut it here, allow this piece to work its way outboard, and then tack it all back together. So hopefully that'll address that. You can probably see that issue better from this angle. And so I will be working on that. And Peter's going to work on this front section. Now, this is apparently a problem they've had with these fenders. If you look, this fender actually fits the core support pretty well. So you have the flange here for the core support and the flange for the fender. They interact on a pretty neutral plane. So you can slide this in and out, not a big deal. On this side, this is what you said, the third fender?
Third fender.
Third fender that he's tried. And although it fits better in some places, this has been an ongoing issue. So if you see this gap, the problem is we've measured this several different ways. The distance from here to here is longer on that side. And also if you look in this corner right here, you see this big opening and this distance, and it's slightly off on that side. They don't match. So what he's going to do is cut loose on the lines around that section right there, and then that whole piece will slide inboard, or should say aft, and we're going to weld it back together to match the dimensions from that side. So he's going to cut that loose and work on that, and I'm going to work on the roof and see how we progress. So in this sequence, we're going to address that split seam that we made on the roof. Made a long cut, and the difficulty here is trying to get the metal to move over into position. So you can see I have a pair of vice grips clamped to the inner flange, and then we just use leverage against that base of that vice grip with a screwdriver to pry over on the upper side of the roof panel. From there, just making adjustments. Some tack welds, little hammer and dolly, or little hammer work I should say, and then the screwdriver is in place to fold the metal over back on itself. Now we did have a low spot here, and so it took a little effort to get a screwdriver up inside and push up on that corner. As I said before, he has dynamite all through this car, so every time I would weld it would make smoke. It's just the way it is, you know, you have the heat. And so he was keeping the air hose, you'll see it come in here in a little bit, he was taking the air hose and blowing the fumes away and cooling down the panel slightly. So I just used the screwdriver here to kind of index the metal. So like one side is a little higher than the other, so you can take the screwdriver and put it in a gap and fold it back or push it back, and it'll change the elevation of the two. So just started tacking things in, and here he is with the blowgun blowing away the fumes, because there's no way to get that dynamite back out of there. It's part of the car at this point, and if you try to take it out, you really run the risk of damaging the sheet metal. So get this welded in, or get it started I should say. I do some welds all the way through, and then he'll finish that up later on and make the whole thing solid. So Peter,
Hey.
tell me, how many fenders have you put on this car to make it fit?
So this is the third one, and it actually is the best fitting. Even with this problem, they've all done that. Original fender didn't do that, you know, had this really huge gap. But this is the best one because of the gaps, and also the two previous had bad waves going. This wasn't straight, this top line there. And this one is laser straight, but we're still dealing with this. So I'm happy we've figured out a fix for it.
Well,
it was really,
and we'll talk about that as well in just a second. But I wanted to highlight, you said when you built this, you used an original fender that was in bad shape, but it gave you a reference point.
yeah.
So all of this should be aligned correctly based on the original fender. And of course, this is all Mustang's Defeer front section, core support, aprons, and all the front suspension is all Mustang's Defeer, and also the rear. So we were looking at this, and we talked about the difference between this fender and how it fits versus how this one was fitting. And our fix was to cut this off. So we just went into the corners and cut this piece off, verified that the shape here was correct where it mates to the core support. So now we put this up in place. It does fit flush on the core support, and we have to tuck it in slightly to compensate for how this fits now. So the only thing we probably have to do is put a little filler up at the top, but this will allow for this fender to move in and out now, while this fits flush on the face of the core support. So if you're having to put something in a bind to make it work, that's a problem. You want to make sure you're working stuff in kind of a relaxed position. as I stress all this time, you know, test fit, test fit, test fit, and you narrow down these problems. Now, I'm going to continue working on the back section here. I need to address this overlap with the door and the quarter, just like I did on the driver's side. We also, you saw in the sequence, welded up this seam that we created, but now the lines line up, and I think it looks really good. So later on, Peter's going to finish welding this back together, grind it down, take care of all that. That's all solid, so not a big concern at this point. Need to address something with this front fender. Now, I want to point out, years ago, I did a 70 sport roof Mustang, and I'd used aftermarket fenders. I think they might have been, I can't remember if they're Goodmark. I don't remember who the company was, but this was a problem. And on those fenders, on that video for the 70, I took the original fender and I cut out this corner and I put that piece onto the aftermarket fender because these transitions weren't quite right. And so that is kind of what we're dealing with right here. Not sure what the fix is exactly yet. Obviously this gap has to be addressed. And I don't know that you want to chew away on the door anymore. You know, the fender might need some cuts and push pieces around, and we're going to see if we can get to that as well. But we're going to continue fitting pieces, welding, and adjusting, and see what we can get done. So this sequence is more of the same with the quarter panel and the door fitment. As I mentioned, this side needed more work, so I did a long cut to separate the flange once again. And as I was doing this, I realized this gap is going to be very large because I really have to make that panel come out almost a quarter of an inch to have it line up with the door itself. And as I mentioned later on in the video, I talk about the idea that when you move metal, you have to have a way to create space or to collapse space. And as I was doing this, I realized I have to do something up here at the top. So I took the Ziz wheel and I cut the groove, made sure it was long enough, and then I cut the top of the quarter panel itself. If you don't do something like this, you can, basically you'll be trying to stretch the metal and you could cause creases or collapse points. So I just keep manipulating the flange outward, and what I found was the best option for this in this instance was, rather than use screwdrivers because it was so thick, I ended up using washers. So I was able to open up the gap and stack washers inside of the gap. I used the hammer here to flatten out the corner of the flange. You want to make sure that it's the metal is not stretched away from that corner because you have to eventually put filler in there and you don't want to have big lumps and stuff. So as I said, I ended up using the washers to hold the metal into place. It made it a lot easier to do that. And here, just using the hammer method to kind of shift the metal slightly as I pry out with a screwdriver. And here I'm just putting in the washers to get it all in a position. So once I'm satisfied with that, I would move on to the welding process. As I was doing this, Peter was working on the front fender. Now, one of the things that he found and he didn't realize is you just can't put a bolt somewhere and expect it to be in the right spot. So we had to work on the bottom of the fender as well because it needed room for the fender to move, and the bolt was in the way of the movement. So he had to enlarge the opening inboard so that the fender could be manipulated in and out. All these things have to be able to move. They have to be able to change index, basically. So when the fender is manipulated at the front, it affects the back of the fender where it meets the door and the rocker panel. Now I'm at the point where I'm going to just weld these in. You can see those washers are in the gap there. And I slowly take my time, as usual. I get the flange where I want it, put in a tack, and move on. You also see that as I'm doing this, I get that part in place, and then I move upward with the screwdriver. But I'm welding, right there at the screwdriver in this instance. And as I move further along, I went further up because the metal, as I move it in one direction, and it'll change in the other. Like when I pulled that part out, it pulled that lower section in just a little. So this just is, years of experience of manipulating the metal and understanding putting pressure in one spot is going to do something else in another. And as I progress through this, I take the washers out using the hammer to just smooth up that flange a little more. Same thing here. I'm pulling out on this section, and I can see the metal move where I want it, and so I tack it in. And you have to kind of be able to visualize what that looks like with the door in place or open. So I have to, focus on that. And it's just, again, years of experience of doing this sort of thing and making things work the way I need to. I continue on up the door, remove that upper washer, put in the tack, and make sure it's all lined up. And as I progress through, here's the hammer again to flatten out that flange a little more. And then this upper section where I had cut the top of the quarter, I just press it in with a screwdriver and tack it. It doesn't need much, just has to be able to stay in place. Now these welds here, I'm manipulating the flange and I'm trying to get the inner flange to move forward because it kind of sucked in with the B-pillar. And so I'm trying to make it fill that gap somewhat. I know this is going to get body filler later, but I want to try to eliminate as much of that transition as I can, which means less filler on top of that. So just keep repeating until you get it the way you want it, and then we'll fully weld the whole thing in and be done with it. Now, the fun thing about trying to make videos is sometimes you have an idea that works and sometimes you don't. So I had filmed a bunch of segments with my Insta360 camera. And the software is kind of weird. Like, it'll film a complete 360 and you have to adjust it to what you want it to see. And what I was finding with the video work that I was trying to do was it wasn't doing what I expected it to. And you should always play with the dog when you get a chance. Throw the ball for him. So I was trying to go through different segments of the videos, and this highlights just some of our interactions. So we can talk about what's going on with the fender, what needs to be moved, what happens whenever you move one part of the fender and how it affects the other parts. And then as Peter continued to work on that front segment, I did some grinding work on the door jamb. So trying to take advantage of the time as we're doing these sort of things. We had that fender on and off probably 20 times, just test fitting it and adjusting and using the hammer and dolly and reshaping. And you'll see here, we end up getting things snugged and into place, and Peter takes a screwdriver and holds it against the A-pillar so that I can do some strikes on it with the socket to make some shape into the top of the fender that we wanted. And then later on, as we're doing this, as we discuss this process and how you want to change directions on the metal, here's the screwdriver. And I use a block of wood on the upper portion of the fender. Now, I'm not hitting the door. I'm just hitting the fender itself. What this allows you to do is reshape the fender. So I'm not hitting the fender directly with a big, heavy mallet. I'm spreading the impact across the board with a 2x4. And what that does, it just allows you to kind of manipulate those smaller areas.
Let's clear this stuff off because foam and everything. Oh, well, wait. We need the fender. The fender is what tells us how high it is.
We need to see how it's going to fit in the pocket better.
Okay.
All right, so we can put the fender on after. So
Okay.
This doesn't matter.
Oh, let me do this. I really should have another.
Okay.
You got it? Okay.
And even that tape is going to make a difference.
Should I take all the tape off?
Well, I'm just saying, it's...
Okay.
Sorry about that.
further down. This point.
Not touching. Do we know those are being pushed down all the way because this isn't heavy?
Oh, they're down.
They're down.
You've got the bolts loose.
Yeah.
They're not going to drop any further. So you've got room here.
But look at this.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's just
Now, I will say that I have not done much with fiberglass pieces. I have worked on fiberglass panels before. I have made panels fit cars, but I have not dealt with like a hood specifically. And this is a custom-made hood. So the side flanges are very thick. And of course, with these Mustangs Sheet hinges, there needs to be room for everything to move. So we're just test fitting the original hood and seeing how much room is there for these hinges. They're totally different than the original style, where basically they're a much thinner material and they have an easy way to collapse into the inner part of the engine bay. These kind of goes out, it feels like it's just a thicker material that's out over top of the aprons. So we set the hood up a few times. I actually got underneath there and was looking where there was contact, and we had it bolted on and went through this sequence a few times just to see what needed to happen. And the end result was the bolt hole mounts need to be lowered so that the hinges can sit lower, but also the pocket had to be made deeper, more like the original. And the aftermarket parts are just not made the same, obviously, so I'll show you that in a second. Well, it's been 2 days, and I think we got a lot done. There's still more work to do up here on the mounts for the hood hinges. Some complications. They're aftermarket. The Mustang Sheet hinges, they're aluminum, and they need some adjustment, particularly because we're using this fiberglass hood, and that has its own issues back and forth with fitment. So there's going to be some fine tuning that Peter's going to do to make that make the hinges drop a little bit. Now, we had worked on a little bit on this fender and door, did some minor adjusting, and it worked out really well on that. This back section here, as you saw earlier in the time lapse, I had cut that open, reshaped the quarter, so now it fits the door a whole lot better. Back here, we worked on making this fit better for the deck lid and the extension, and also filled in those gaps there. So I don't have the extension on, but this side fits just as well as this side. Nice line here, all this transition's nice. And then of course we talked about this roof line being out of place, so cut into the roof sail panel here, pushed this over, or pulled it over in a sense, and then tack welded it back on. And now that the chrome fits really nice, so all that's good to go. This quarter panel actually needed a lot more work than the other side. As I opened this up and I started looking at it, the gap here, I had to make it come out quite a bit, but I had to make it come out up here as well. And so I made a cut up on top to allow this to kind of sink down, because anytime you're moving metal, you have to give it a place to go, or you have to create a place for it to come from, in a sense. So when you're trying to pull or push, you have to think, well, what's the sacrifice? So in this case, cutting a line up here allowed this to move out a little bit. And then, as you saw in the time lapse, I put washers in between here and kept adjusting until I had, whoops, got the air hose, until I had, and I kept adjusting until we have a decent fitment on the quarter and the door. So we got this to fit really nice now. Very happy with that. Up here, this section of the roof was kind of in. So I did some hammer and dolly work. I ended up actually using some sockets and came inside this radius, tapped on the socket to reshape this. And now the chrome fits almost dead on. So this is okay. It's gonna need some more work done here, filler strip put in, and then body filler will have to transition all of that. One of the other conflicts was this fender and the door. Now it's not adjusted right now, it's just bolted up, but this was fitting really bad. And this was making contact with the A-pillar. And so we did a variety of things, ended up taking using a screwdriver behind this part of the fender and a big socket and hitting it to create more of a curve, and then just kept going back and forth. I took it off and used a dolly here and rolled this edge back some and just kept kind of going back and forth until we end up with what ends up being a decent gap. Now I can move this fender a little bit, and there will still need to be some welding done to address this curve and maybe a little trimming up here at the top of the door. But overall, this worked out really well. Very happy with how this turned out. And then this front fender, we had adjusted this inner brace, had cut it loose, reshaped it, and welded it back in. Peter did a great job on that. And now the bolt holes line up very well with the apron, so we can index the fender in and out, and that takes care of the drops at the back. Now, no fault of Peter. He's learning, and I've given him a lot of information, shown him a lot of tips and tricks, and every time we talk about the car and the metal, we want to address how things interact. So if you have a problem with, say, the fender, you have to think about what changes if I change this point of the fender. So if I move this, it changes the length back there. Or if you move something with the door, it affects something back there. So the whole sequence, as I said, sequence is scored, right? You have to get the sequence right so that everything at the end of the day lines up.
Also, that bolt in here, I mean, that was a major problem when we figured it out.
That is true. So he had welded in the inner bracket here based on the original car, had put it exactly where it was on that car, and we discovered that the top of this fender was actually hitting that. So we cut off that top edge to allow this fender to move. So sometimes something is in the way and you have to find it. So I look for witness marks, indications in paint, stuff like that will show you this is where it's rubbing, why is it rubbing, what do I need to change. So otherwise, oh yes, one more thing over here. Peter cut out the pocket from the original apron on what was left of the original car, because the pocket on that apron wasn't deep enough for the Mustang's Fear hinge. It wouldn't sit down inside. So if you look like this here,
It's half.
yeah, it's about half the indentation, and the original is a lot crisper. Even on this one, on this side, this looks a lot better compared to this thing, which is very soft and doesn't allow room. So there's still some more things to do, but we also cut out some of that and put in that piece, tack welded it in so that there's room for that hinge to settle down inside. Okay, so you've probably seen some of these other videos where I've done what I call roadshow type of videos. And last year I went to help James with his 67 Mustang convertible. A few years back I helped Mike with his 68, I believe it was, Cougar. And I've also done other videos where I've gone to people's homes and looked at their finished product and just kind of done an overview of what they're working on. So this one has been pretty rewarding. It's been a lot more work, I will say that. And we spent 2 days in here and stayed busy. I mean, we stayed busy. Let me say, first of all, thanks to your wife.
Oh yeah.
For making some food for me, because I like to eat. So she helped keep me going with food. But we did a lot of stuff here, as I mentioned earlier, all the stuff, all the body work and different things. Now, one thing I want to mention to you or ask you, what's the intent behind this car? Why are you building this, we'll say 429 Tribute?
Yeah. So growing up, my dad had two 69 Mustangs, both Boss 9s, 70 Mach 1, 67 GT350. Had to sell them, you know, as you know, time goes on. So I bought that original car, and it looked fine. It wasn't.
Yeah.
And then he passed away in 2019. I bought it with the intention of us restoring it together.
Okay.
Right? Big car guy, he wrote over 90 books on cars, did all his own photography. So I've been around cars my whole life. So the plan was to restore it together. He passed away suddenly, and then a close friend of mine who was also like a father figure, big car guy, also passed away. So I'm like, I gotta do it now. So brought it to the Media Blaster, and it was just not worth anything.
Yeah, I showed that earlier.
Just Swiss cheese.
Car's pretty rough.
Real rough. So I decided, well, I had to watch some videos on, okay, how can I, whatever. And through the confidence from watching these videos, like, well, I'll just build a new one, right? And so literally this is YouTube University in action, okay? YouTube University, right here. And I really took it pretty far, actually, you know, without knowing what I'm doing. Right. But it's the, you know, it's the decades of experience and just the practice that I don't have. Right. So that's where Barry came in, and I took it as far as I could go, knowing I can't go further without. I need an expert. Yeah. You know, that's it. And it's been an incredible 2-day experience. Really, we work 7 hours every day. And it's I think really fun.
Like I said, we got a lot done, and it's great. You know, you all see my videos at my home shop, and it's just me. That's all there is. It's just me. Sometimes Roger helps me out. I've even asked some of my other neighbors, hey, can you come over here and help me put this hood on the car? But for the most part, everything I do is by myself. The value right now between the two of us is compound interest, let's say. You know, I start doing something and he's right there, what do you need? Or I start to show him something and he's able to run with that. And I can tell him, hold this while I do this. And it just makes a world of difference to have a helper. But you know, I'm stuck by myself as it is. So anyway,
he needs an assistant. He will do incredible things, more incredible, if he had someone to fetch him things.
Yeah. So anyway, that's going to be it for this video. I want to thank everybody for watching. If you would leave a comment, a thumbs up, subscribe, all that sort of thing. And of course, I always thank my patrons. They're the ones that help really keep me going in this process. So I have to, you know, show my appreciation for them, as I always do. If you're interested in any of my products or any of my links, they're down in the description below. You can follow those. But otherwise, that'll be it. So until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya. Okay, so we're going to do one more thing for the video. He has a 99 NASCAR Super Speedway chassis. And you said this was never raced?
Never raced. Nope.
And then somebody put a turbo on it?
So it's a 355 forged internals, Holly Sniper, EFI, and it's pro-charged.
Pro-charged?
Yeah. It makes really nice noises, which I will show you
oh, man.
in a second. Oh, let me tighten this.
And this needs to have like a body put on it.
Yeah, I'm looking for one. If anyone knows where one could be.
So 99.
99 to 06 is the body style.
99 to 06. Crazy.
Nice, let me put this hose back on real quick. I got a weld on the blow-off valve right there.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because there's nowhere else really for it to go.
So you want to make this street legal?
Yeah, I do. And apparently in Florida, it's not that difficult. Surprise, surprise.
So it's automatic, okay.
It won't be though. So
oh, you're going to make it a 4-speed.
What I really want to do is find a wrecked C6 or C7 Corvette and pull the engine and T56 out of it.
Okay.
It's really what I want to do.
All right.
Yeah, but fortunate to have very understanding neighbors.
Yeah.
Well, I have the whole exhaust here.
Yeah.
With actually boom tubes.
Okay.
So it'll sound just like a NASCAR too. This is just open headers.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really wild, man.
That's
it's
pretty
about,
cool.
550 horsepower.
That's pretty cool. All right. Well, there you go. Some bonus footage. I like it.